And it's time to talk about Russian myths. Actually, not about Russian myths, but about debunking these Russian myths. And to do this, we are inviting our friends and partners from Stopfake. And tonight, I am joined by Yevhen Fedchenko, editor-in-chief of Stopfake. Yevhen, greetings and thanks for joining.
Yes, thanks for inviting.
So, Russian propaganda works 24/7 to do what they do, and you have to do your job in order to actually destroy what they are doing. So, let's start immediately from our first case. And our first case is as follows. Over the year, corruption in Ukraine has increased by 500%. Moreover, the financial and aid from the US has not reached Kyiv. According to the Russian media, the US House of Representatives, and this is the lower chamber of the American Congress, distributed this information. Was it really so? Let us check.
Kyiv receives only 20% of financial aid from Washington. The USA records a huge number of corruption cases in Ukraine.
Russian media outlets such as Ridovka allegedly cite Michael McCall, member of the US House of Representatives. However, McCall's quote has been purposefully misinterpreted.
Of the $113 billion appropriated across 4 supplementals, approximately 60% is going to American troops, American workers, and to modernizing American stockpiles. In fact, only 20% of the funding is going directly to the Ukrainian government in the form of direct budgetary assistance.
Particularly, the statement of only 20% of the US financial aid going to Ukraine's government was distorted by Russian propagandists. The Kremlin media stated that the other 80% is being embezzled by the Ukrainian authorities. They also reported an alleged enormous amount of corruption cases. In fact, this information is fabricated and contradicts the conclusions of the US committee.
So, Yevhen, my first question to you would be as follows. Why is it so important for Russia and for Kremlin to prove that corruption in Ukraine exists and even prospers?
Yeah, they want to reinforce that narrative all the time to allegedly blame Ukraine in financial ineffectiveness and also prove that it's absolutely useless for Ukraine's allies and partners to support Ukraine, because as you've seen in the story, allegedly money and other resources which are sent Ukraine's way are not reaching out the destinations. They are embezzled somehow on the way because of allegedly huge corruption which exists in Ukraine. So here we see how 2 different stories are masterfully combined to construct this narrative. So huge corruption on one hand, and as a result, ineffectiveness of the use of the aid, including military aid, which is supplied to Ukraine. And this is not a new story. So as we've seen, this narrative was already mentioned many, many times. And this is very, very important to understand how you construct the narrative. So you repeat it all the time, different pieces, to make sure that all of them as puzzles come together, and this narrative sticks to the mind of people in different countries, who as a result would say, yes, we should not support Ukraine, or we should not support Ukraine as much as we used to support, because we've seen somewhere in the news that Ukraine is not effectively using that, because Ukraine is a corrupt state, as we know. So this is the purpose of narratives like this, to deconstruct the image of Ukraine as an effective fighter, which effectively uses all the resources, undermines the trust of allies and partners in Ukraine.
So as far as I understand, the main target group for this fake is from the West.
Yes, so this is the most important audience. And also, as you've seen, they are also using the policymakers from the West to create this fake narrative, because they believe that if they would be using Western policymakers and decision makers, that would make the story looking much more trustworthy, and people would trust it much more. And of course, very few people would really go to do their own fact-checking what really was said on the floor of the Congress, and nobody would go and read all the statements on the floor and other things. So that's what we as fact-checkers do. We really do go and check all the speeches, all the details which were mentioned over there, and we have found that both allegations in this story are completely untrue because A, there is no any evidences of growing corruption of Ukraine, and second, when we heard this figure of 20%, that was used in a very different context, which is actually very positive in reality for Ukraine, because it was mentioned that most of the money which United States government is allocated to help Ukraine are actually staying in the United States, as in new jobs, new supply materials, money for training of Ukrainian armed forces, which goes to U.S. armed forces and other things. So this is very powerful argument that actually when United States are helping Ukraine, they are actually boosting, first of all, their own economy.
Okay, I see. Let's then turn to our next case. New old Russian fakes. Trying to undermine Ukraine's trust to its allies, Russian media report that the Ukrainian soldiers allegedly complained about American military equipment. Why is it so? Let us find.
Ukrainian servicemen started to complain about military armored cars supplied by the West through New 24 reports, citing data from the military informant Telegram channel.
Although the military informant Telegram channel has previously repeatedly spread disinformation about Ukraine, there is no such information cited by the Russian media. In fact, the statement is the opposite.
A good example why it is necessary to increase the number of armored vehicles for increased security in Russia's armed forces. Even with such serious damage to equipment, its crew usually remains intact.
This Russian attempt to publish a lie is a part of the propaganda narrative about military equipment received by Ukraine from Western partners being outdated. In fact, there are no complaints by the Ukrainian military about the American mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle shown in the video.
So, Yevhen, I'm curious, for what purpose does Kremlin want to cast this doubt?
Yeah, so basically this is a continuation of the previous strategy to sow doubts, but this time not in Ukraine, but in Ukraine Western allies, who allegedly supply APCs and tanks of low quality, which are not sufficient for their Ukrainian army war efforts. And again, this story is not new, so we've seen it during all the campaign when our Western partners started to supply different types of equipment. We've seen stories about each of them. So the purpose is to demonstrate that everything which is given to Ukraine is allegedly of very, very low quality, and basically US armed forces or European partners are in reality just getting rid of something which they do not need because they want something much more advanced and new and more capable on the front line. So that's why they are so willing to give it to Ukraine. So basically, it should undermine the whole mission of Western support of Ukraine in the eyes of Ukrainians, and also to demonstrate to audiences outside of Ukraine also that United States and other European partners and Australia, which is also supplying, and Canada, military equipment to Ukraine are not reliable. So they basically, on one hand, as they blame, they conduct the proxy war against Russia on the territory in Ukraine, but on another hand, they are just giving to Ukraine something which is not very usable on the front line. So this is the purpose to create small cracks in relationship between allies and partners, and it works both ways.
And I really hope they are not successful in doing this. Actually, they cannot persuade, I hope they cannot persuade our allies and partners.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Latest news, trends, and analytics on all about Ukraine. Like, share, and subscribe. Any questions, proposals, and comments? Contact us via email.